The Atlantic, 1942. German U-boats, sleek predators of the deep, reigned supreme, their wolf packs tearing through Allied convoys with impunity. Merchant ships, laden with vital supplies for a beleaguered Britain, vanished beneath the waves, their crews lost to the icy depths. Admiral Karl Dönitz, architect of the U-boat campaign, boasted of victory, his captains scoffing at the notion of any effective countermeasure. Yet in the shipyards of America, a humble, overlooked vessel was taking shape. A tiny corvette designed to challenge the very titans of the Kriegsmarine. Its mission, to turn the hunter into the hunted. A task many deemed impossible. But what if this small ship, dismissed by the U-boat aces, held the key to their undoing? The year 1942 dawned grimly for the Allied cause. Across the vast, unforgiving expanse of the North Atlantic, German U-boats, operating in devastating wolf packs, were systematically strangling Britain's lifeline. Merchant shipping losses soared to catastrophic levels, with hundreds of thousands of tons of vital supplies, food, fuel, munitions, sinking beneath the waves each month. The happy time, as U-boat crews chillingly called their period of unchallenged dominance, threatened to starve Britain into submission and cripple any hope of a European second front. The memory of Pearl Harbor, still fresh and searing in the American consciousness, fueled a fierce determination to fight back. But the sheer scale of the U-boat threat seemed insurmountable. Traditional naval doctrine, focused on large battleships and cruisers, offered few immediate answers to the stealthy, submerged menace. The cold, grey waters of the Atlantic became a graveyard, the air thick with the smell of oil and despair, punctuated by the distant, muffled thud of torpedo explosions that echoed the cries of drowning sailors. In Washington, D.C., the mood was a mix of grim resolve and mounting desperation. Naval strategists grappled with the problem, their existing fleet ill-equipped for the relentless, close-quarters combat required to protect slow-moving convoys. What was needed was not another battleship, but hundreds of small, fast, and heavily armed escorts, ships that could be built quickly and in vast numbers. This was where Commander Thomas "Tom" Riley, a brilliant but often overlooked naval engineer with a penchant for practical solutions, entered the fray. Riley, a man whose quiet demeanor belied an iron will, had been advocating for a simplified, mass-producible anti-submarine vessel since before America's entry into the war. His designs, initially dismissed by some senior admirals who favored larger, more conventional warships, focused on a compact, rugged hull capable of carrying the latest anti-submarine technology. He saw the future not in steel behemoths, but in nimble, adaptable hunters, a vision born from countless hours poring over blueprints and casualty reports. "We don't need luxury, gentlemen," Riley had argued passionately in a stuffy Pentagon meeting, his voice cutting through the cigar smoke that perpetually hung in the air, a tangible representation of the tension. "We need a workhorse, something that can be built in weeks, not years, by every shipyard from Maine to California. Something that can take a beating and keep fighting." His vision was for a corvette, a vessel smaller than a destroyer, yet robust enough for the brutal Atlantic, equipped with nascent sonar technology and powerful depth charges. The idea was met with skepticism. A glorified fishing trawler? One admiral, Rear Admiral Harrison Vance, had scoffed, his uniform stiff with braid and tradition, his eyes reflecting a deep-seated adherence to established naval power. "Against Dönitz's finest. We need proper warships, Commander, not glorified tugs. This is a war, not a fishing expedition." But the mounting losses, starkly displayed on charts covered in red pins marking sunken ships, over 600 Allied vessels lost in the first 6 months of 1942 alone, eventually silenced the critics. The sheer, undeniable reality of the sinking tonnage forced a re-evaluation. The can-do spirit of American industrial mobilization, ignited by the war, began to embrace the challenge. Factories that once built automobiles now retooled for shipbuilding, their assembly lines humming with a new, urgent purpose, the rhythmic clang of hammers echoing the nation's resolve. Shipyards, from the bustling docks of Boston to the sprawling facilities of the Pacific Northwest, began to lay down the keels of these new, unassuming vessels. Riley, working tirelessly with a small team of dedicated engineers and shipbuilders, pushed his design through. He envisioned a ship that was easy to maintain, simple to operate, and above all, deadly to U-boats. The emphasis was on speed of construction and sheer numbers, recognizing that quantity had a quality all its own in this attritional war. The first keel was laid in a flurry of patriotic fervor, a symbol of America's unwavering commitment to its allies and its determination to overcome any obstacle. The USS Vigilant, a prototype of the new class, began to take shape in a New England shipyard. Its steel plates welded by men and women working around the clock, fueled by coffee and a profound sense of national duty. These small ships, initially viewed as a stopgap measure, were about to become the unsung heroes of the Atlantic, their humble appearance belying their revolutionary potential. The challenge was immense, the stakes immeasurable, but the American spirit, forged in the fires of adversity, was ready to meet it head-on. The question remained, could these tiny vessels truly turn the tide against the formidable U-boat menace, or would they merely become more casualties in the vast, cold ocean? The answer would be written in blood and steel, far from the comfortable offices of Washington, in the churning, unforgiving waters of the Atlantic. The fate of the free world hung in the balance, resting on the shoulders of these small ships and the determined men who would sail them. The first of the new corvettes, designated the Patrol Craft Escort, or PCE class, began to roll off the assembly lines with astonishing speed. The USS Vigilant, under the command of Lieutenant Commander Arthur "Art" Jenkins, a seasoned but unconventional officer, was among the first to be commissioned in late 1942. Jenkins, a man who preferred practical seamanship to parade ground drills, understood the raw, brutal nature of the Atlantic. His crew was a microcosm of wartime America. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, fishermen from Gloucester, all thrust together into a cramped steel shell designed for one purpose: to hunt. Training was intense and unforgiving. The young sailors, many of whom had never seen the ocean before, had to quickly master the intricacies of sonar operation, depth charge deployment, and the unforgiving rhythms of convoy escort. The ships themselves were Spartan, designed for function over comfort. Bunks were stacked 3 high, mess halls were tiny, and the constant vibration of the engines permeated every corner, making sleep a luxury and quiet conversation impossible. The smell of diesel, salt, and stale coffee became the ship's signature scent, a constant reminder of their arduous mission. Life aboard a corvette on convoy duty was a relentless test of endurance. The North Atlantic was a cruel mistress, unleashing storms that tossed the small ships like corks, sending green water crashing over the bows, icing up superstructure and threatening to tear men from their posts. Seasickness was rampant, a constant companion to the bone-chilling cold and the ever-present threat of a U-boat attack. Yet, through it all, the crews learned. They learned to operate the new technologies, particularly the improved sonar. Early sonar, or ASDIC as the British called it, was still rudimentary, prone to false echoes from whales or thermal layers, but in the hands of dedicated operators, it became a deadly tool. Petty Officer First Class Samuel "Sam" Miller, a former radio enthusiast from Ohio with an almost preternatural sense of hearing, became the Vigilant's resident sonar wizard. He could distinguish the faint rhythmic ping of a U-boat from the myriad of ocean noises, his ears finely tuned to the subtle differences, often working for hours in the darkened sonar shack, headphones clamped tight, his face illuminated only by the faint glow of the scope. Depth charges, initially dropped haphazardly, evolved into a science. The corvettes were equipped with racks at the stern and K-guns on the sides, allowing for a pattern of charges to be laid, creating a lethal underwater explosion zone. The concussive force of a depth charge detonating nearby was terrifying, shaking the ship violently, often causing minor damage, but the crews knew it was the sound of hope, the sound of a potential kill. The development of the creeping attack tactic, where an escort would approach a submerged U-boat silently, using its sonar, and drop charges without the U-boat knowing it was being hunted, proved particularly effective. This required immense skill and coordination, often performed in the dead of night, under the cover of driving rain or thick fog, relying on the precise timing of the bridge crew and the unwavering focus of the sonar man. The psychological toll was immense. The constant vigilance, the sudden alarms, the deafening explosions, and the knowledge that at any moment a torpedo could rip through their hull. The first deployments were fraught with peril. The Vigilant joined its first convoy, HX-212, in November 1942, bound for Liverpool. The convoy stretched for miles, a vulnerable procession of slow-moving targets, a tempting feast for any lurking U-boat. The U-boats were there, lurking beneath the waves, their hydrophones listening for the telltale thrum of propellers. The first engagement for the Vigilant was chaotic. A merchant ship, the SS Manchester City, was struck by a torpedo, erupting in a geyser of flame and smoke, its distress flares painting the night sky with a terrifying glow. Jenkins immediately ordered the Vigilant to the attack, its engines roaring as it peeled away from the convoy, leaving the burning freighter behind, a grim necessity of war. Miller's sonar picked up a contact, faint but distinct. "Contact! Bearing here 40, range 1,200 yards, he yelled, his voice tight with adrenaline, his hand steady on the controls. Jenkins barked orders, the ship shuddering as it turned. Depth charges set to 200 feet. Stand by. The first pattern was dropped, sending plumes of water high into the air, followed by a deep, resonant thud that vibrated through the ship's hull. No immediate results. The U-boat, Kapitän-Leutnant Klaus Richter's U-571, was deep, attempting to evade, but the Vigilant was relentless. For hours they hunted, pinging, dropping, listening. The psychological warfare was as intense as the physical. The U-boat crew, accustomed to easy kills, now felt the terrifying pressure of being pursued by an unseen enemy. The explosions above them a constant, nerve-shattering reminder of their vulnerability. This was not the happy time anymore. This was a new, brutal dance, and the small American corvette was learning the steps quickly, improvising, adapting, and slowly, surely, turning the tide. The crews, though exhausted and terrified, felt a nascent pride. They were no longer just protecting ships, they were hunting the hunters, and for the first time, they felt they had a fighting chance. Aboard the U-571, Kapitän-Leutnant Klaus Richter, a veteran of a dozen successful patrols and recipient of the Iron Cross, felt a cold dread he hadn't known since the early days of the war. His U-boat, usually the apex predator, was now the prey. The relentless pings of the American sonar, followed by the earth-shattering concussions of depth charges, had been a constant companion for the past 6 hours. His crew, once confident and jovial, now moved with a palpable tension, their faces pale in the dim red light of the control room, their breath misting in the cold, damp air. "Tiefer! Tiefer!" Richter commanded, his voice strained, urging his boat deeper into the crushing abyss, hoping to escape the relentless hunter above. But the American corvette, the USS Vigilant, seemed to anticipate every move. Its sonar, more precise than anything Richter had encountered, tracked them with unnerving accuracy, its relentless ping, a hammer blow against their nerves. The pressure on the hull groaned ominously, a symphony of impending doom. Richter's experience was not isolated. Across the Atlantic, reports began to filter back to Admiral Donitz's headquarters in Lorient, France, painting a disturbing picture. U-boats were failing to return, or returning heavily damaged. their captains reporting encounters with small, tenacious escorts that seem to possess an uncanny ability to find and hold contact. "They are like gnats, Admiral," one frustrated Capitan Lieutenant reported, his voice laced with a new, unfamiliar fear. "But gnats with teeth. They simply will not let go. We dive, we maneuver, but they are always there above us, dropping their infernal bombs." Dönitz, initially dismissive of the American industrial output of small craft, began to take notice. His intelligence officers, accustomed to tracking British destroyers and Canadian corvettes, struggled to identify these new, persistent American vessels. They were too small to be destroyers, too numerous to be a specialized class. The term corvette was often used with a sneer in German naval circles, implying inferiority, a sentiment that was rapidly turning to bewilderment. The Wolfpack tactics, once the cornerstone of U-boat success, were becoming a liability. When a U-boat attacked a convoy, it now often found itself isolated and relentlessly pursued by one or more of these small, fast escorts. The coordinated attacks designed to overwhelm convoy defenses were now being met with coordinated counterattacks. The corvettes, operating in pairs or trios, would box in a U-boat, one holding sonar contact while another dropped charges, or a third moved in for a creeping attack, a silent, deadly approach that left the U-boat blind and vulnerable. The psychological impact on U-boat crews was immense. The happy time was over, replaced by the Black May of 1943, a month that saw unprecedented U-boat losses. In that single month, 43 U-boats were sunk, a staggering blow to Dönitz's fleet, representing nearly a quarter of his operational boats. The German Naval High Command was perplexed. They knew the Allies had broken their Enigma codes, but this new, aggressive anti-submarine warfare seemed to stem from more than just intelligence. It was a fundamental shift in tactics and technology, embodied by these small, unassuming American ships whose very existence they had initially dismissed. Back on the Vigilant, Lieutenant Commander Jenkins and his crew were exhausted but exhilarated. After nearly 8 hours of hunting, the U-571 had finally succumbed. A massive underwater explosion, far more violent than any depth charge, had ripped through the ocean, followed by the telltale sound of groaning metal and then silence. Debris, including German uniforms, personal effects and fragments of the U-boat's wooden decking, had risen to the surface, a grim testament to their success. It was a grim victory, but a victory nonetheless. Sam Miller, the sonar operator, slumped in his chair, his ears ringing, but a quiet satisfaction settled over him. They had done it. They had hunted down a U-boat and destroyed it. This single engagement, replicated hundreds of times across the Atlantic, validated the entire concept of the American corvette. These small ships, once scoffed at, were proving to be the most effective anti-submarine weapon in the Allied arsenal. The arrogance of the U-boat captains was being systematically dismantled, replaced by fear and confusion. The tide of the Battle of the Atlantic was turning, one depth charge at a time, one small corvette at a time. The relentless American ingenuity, dismissed by the enemy, was now delivering devastating blows, proving that even the smallest vessel, armed with determination and innovation, could change the course of a global war. By the spring of 1944, the Battle of the Atlantic had decisively turned. The German U-boat fleet, once the terror of the seas, was decimated. The relentless pressure exerted by Allied escort groups, spearheaded by the American corvettes and their larger destroyer escort cousins, had made the North Atlantic a death trap for U-boats. From the peak of U-boat successes in 1942, when over 1,100 Allied ships were sunk, the numbers plummeted dramatically. In 1943 alone, over 240 U-boats were destroyed, a staggering loss that crippled Dönitz's ability to wage effective submarine warfare. The small, unassuming corvettes, built in American shipyards with a speed and efficiency that astonished the world, had played an outsized role in this victory. They had proven that quantity, combined with innovative tactics and dedicated crews, could overcome even the most formidable threat. The cold, grey waters that once echoed with the cries of the drowning now bore witness to the silent descent of shattered U-boats, their crews trapped in their steel coffins. The impact of these vessels extended far beyond mere statistics. They saved countless lives, both of merchant mariners and the Allied soldiers, sailors and airmen whose supplies they protected. The steady flow of material across the Atlantic ensured that Britain could continue to fight and that the eventual D-Day landings could be supplied. Without the corvettes, the war in Europe might have taken a very different and far more tragic turn. The can-do spirit of American industrial mobilization, initially scoffed at by the Axis powers, had delivered a decisive blow. Commander Thomas Riley's vision, once dismissed as impractical, had been vindicated on the blood-soaked waves of the Atlantic. His simple, robust design had become the backbone of the convoy system, a testament to pragmatic engineering over traditional naval grandeur. The rhythmic clang of hammers in American shipyards had forged the instruments of victory, turning out hundreds of these vital ships, each one a beacon of hope in the darkest hours of the war. The crews of these corvettes, like Lieutenant Commander Jenkins and Petty Officer Miller of the USS Vigilant, were the unsung heroes of this victory. They endured unimaginable hardships, the constant threat of attack, the brutal weather, the cramped conditions, the psychological toll of hunting and being hunted. Many of them were young men, barely out of their teens, who had traded their civilian lives for the grim reality of war at sea. They learned to fight, to survive and to win, often with little fanfare or recognition. Their courage and resilience, their ability to adapt and improvise under extreme pressure, were as crucial as the technology they wielded. They were the embodiment of American determination, facing down a technologically advanced and ruthless enemy with grit and ingenuity. Their stories, often untold, are a testament to the human cost of war and the extraordinary bravery of ordinary men. The smell of diesel and salt, the constant vibration of the engines, the chilling ping of sonar, and the deafening roar of depth charges became the soundtrack to their youth, a memory that would forever define them. After the war, many of these corvettes were decommissioned, sold for scrap, or repurposed for civilian use, fading into obscurity. They lacked the glamour of battleships or aircraft carriers, their stories often overshadowed by larger, more dramatic narratives. Yet their legacy endures. The innovations in anti-submarine warfare developed and perfected on these small ships, advanced sonar techniques, coordinated escort tactics, improved depth charge patterns, and the sheer tenacity of their crews became the foundation for future naval doctrine. The lessons learned in the Battle of the Atlantic, often at great cost, transformed naval warfare forever. The small American corvette, once an object of German U-boat captains' scorn, had not only decimated their wolf packs, but had also fundamentally altered the course of World War II. It stands as a powerful reminder that true strength often lies not in size or initial prestige, but in adaptability, innovation, and the unwavering spirit of those who refuse to be defeated. The forgotten heroes of the corvettes, their names etched only in the memories of those they saved, deserve their rightful place in history, for they were the ones who truly turned the tide, ensuring the survival of freedom against tyranny. Their quiet heroism, born of necessity and forged in the crucible of the Atlantic, remains an enduring symbol of American ingenuity and resolve. If you found this untold story of American ingenuity and resilience inspiring, hit that like button and subscribe for more historical narratives.